Every way that Disney changed the story, it changed it for the worse.
The new Disney boss babe, who is Rachel Zegler, the inverse of happy.
Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged.
To everyone who hates when I win.
So she comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat.
Rachel Zegler is a PR nightmare.
That at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
There's something wrong with her. She's disturbed, she's unhappy, and she thinks it's about feminism and the patriarchy and about abortion.
Snow White bombs, breaks records for the lowest live-action remake.
What was supposed to be Disney's next billion-dollar fairy tale turned into one of the most spectacular implosions in recent Hollywood memory. A studio known for turning nostalgia into gold somehow created a full-blown disaster. And at the center of it all was Rachel Zegler, a rising star whose words off-screen may have been more damaging than anything that happened on it. From tone-deaf interviews to viral meltdowns, this is the full unraveling of how Disney's Snow White remake became a cultural punching bag, and how Zegler's attempt to rewrite a classic may have rewritten her career instead. Once upon a time, Disney believed it had its next billion-dollar blockbuster. A live-action remake of Snow White, the film that started it all back in 1937, was supposed to be a crown jewel in the studio's legacy of reimagined classics. With a massive $250 million budget, A-list talent, and the full weight of Disney marketing behind it, expectations weren't just high, they were astronomical. But what was meant to be a love letter to a timeless fairy tale turned into a headline-making fiasco. Snow White didn't just underperform, it flopped hard. And at the center of the storm, Rachel Zegler, the fresh-faced star handpicked to lead Disney's newest princess era. But instead of charming audiences, she sparked a cultural firestorm. From off-putting interviews to eyebrow-raising statements about the original film, Zegler became a lightning rod for controversy before the movie even hit theaters. And when the backlash hit full force, it wasn't just the movie's reputation that took a hit. It was hers. What started as a bold reimagining of a Disney classic spiraled into something no one saw coming. A fan revolt, a press tour disaster, and a career suddenly teetering on the edge. As the numbers dropped and memes flooded social media, it became clear this wasn't just a bad box office weekend. It was the unraveling of a narrative, one where the heroine wasn't saved and the fairy tale ended in chaos. It was supposed to be a moment of vulnerability, maybe even redemption. Filming herself from what looked like her bedroom, Rachel Zegler sat in front of the camera and spoke directly to her critics. Her voice wavered, her expression sincere, but her message was anything but subtle. When the winged victory came to the Louvre, it was in pieces, she said, comparing herself to the iconic sculpture. And people still line up to see her. It was part metaphor, part rallying cry, a plea for grace, framed with artistic flair. But the internet didn't see courage, it saw cringe. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. TikTok exploded with reaction videos, some confused, others openly mocking. Her solemn comparison to an ancient marble statue quickly became meme fodder, stitched into comedy skits and sarcastic duets. On X, formerly Twitter, it got even uglier. Zegler's poetic defiance was twisted into proof of self-importance. The more heartfelt her message tried to be, the more people used it to reinforce the narrative that had already taken hold. That she wasn't relatable, she was out of touch. She had hoped to take back control of the conversation. Instead, she handed her critics fresh ammunition on a silver platter. The emotional honesty of the video was lost beneath wave after wave of sarcasm and satire. It didn't matter what she meant, it only mattered how it landed. And for a growing segment of the audience, it landed with a thud. This wasn't just another bad PR moment. It was the spark that sent the backlash into overdrive. If Rachel Zegler thought her emotional video would earn her empathy, she underestimated the internet's appetite for spectacle. Because once the clip started circulating, it wasn't just backlash, it was full-blown parody. Her line, "I hope people still line up to see me despite my flaws," became instant meme material. TikTok creators began reenacting the video with dramatic filters, fake marble cracks painted on their faces, and exaggerated sobs layered over classical music. It was less about criticism and more about performance, and Rachel had become the main character no one wanted to be. Her winged victory reference, meant to highlight resilience, backfired spectacularly. On YouTube and X, users sarcastically labelled her the Louvre Princess, while edits comparing her to Renaissance statues with sunglasses and lattes flooded meme pages. One TikTok skit featured a creator whispering, "Even the Mona Lisa is tired," mimicking Rachel's serious tone, before bursting into laughter. It didn't stop there. Her past interviews resurfaced and were re-edited with reaction clips, slow zoom-ins, and clown music. One popular video even turned her quotes into a fake fragrance ad titled "Entitlement" by Rachel. And once she said she should be paid for every hour the film streams online. That line was clipped endlessly, layered over cash register sounds and supercuts of luxury red carpet footage. What might have been a valid point about residuals became twisted into a meme about delusion. In the eyes of the internet, Rachel wasn't just the star of Snow White. She was the star of her own viral spiral, and the more she spoke, the louder the laughter got. The outrage didn't come out of nowhere. It had been simmering long before the viral meltdown. Internet sleuths were quick to point out that Rachel Zegler's troubles didn't start with one emotional video. In fact, months earlier, she had already planted the seeds of controversy in a series of interviews that aged like milk. Her tone? Confident. Her message? Clear. This was not your grandmother's Snow White. In one now infamous clip, Rachel flat out mocked the original film, calling it weird that a prince would fall in love with a girl he just met. "A guy literally stalks her." "Yeah, weird," she laughed, visibly cringing at the love story that had once enchanted generations. In another interview, she made it clear that her version of Snow White wouldn't be dreaming of true love. She'd be a leader, not a love-struck girl waiting for a man to save her. To Disney executives, this may have sounded like a bold, modern reimagining, but to audiences, it came off as smug, dismissive, and disrespectful. Fans weren't just reacting to a reboot, they were reacting to what they felt was a rejection of everything they loved about the original. The romance, the charm, the classic fairy tale innocence, all brushed aside with a smirk. And it wasn't just conservative critics or so-called haters calling it out. Longtime Disney loyalists, parents, even neutral viewers took issue with the tone. This wasn't about progress, it felt like contempt. By the time the movie hit theaters, the damage had already been done. The internet wasn't shocked by Rachel's meltdown. They'd seen it coming for months. When Snow White finally limped into theaters, any hope of a quiet recovery vanished the moment the numbers dropped. Opening weekend told the story loud and clear. Audiences didn't just skip it, they rejected it. Theaters sat half empty. Advance sales had been soft, but no one expected this level of apathy. Industry insiders braced for underperformance. What they got instead was a full-blown financial implosion. And the reaction inside Hollywood was immediate. Studio executives, who once promoted Snow White as a flagship project, went silent. Promotional campaigns were quietly pulled. Merchandise that had been mass-produced for the holiday rush was suddenly marked down, collecting dust on store shelves. Disney, a company known for turning nostalgia into billions, had stumbled in a way that felt historic. Internally, murmurs grew louder, not just about the film's performance, but about the decisions that led to it. Had the marketing misfired? Did they lean too hard into rebranding a fairy tale that never asked to be fixed? Or was it something deeper? A growing disconnect between the studio's creative vision and the audience's emotional expectations. Theatres moved fast. Premium screens were handed over to better-performing films within days. Midweek showtimes were slashed. Some cinemas pulled Snow White altogether by week 2. Analysts began tossing around words like brand damage and franchise fatigue, but there was no sugarcoating it. Snow White was a high-stakes swing that didn't just miss, it cratered. For Rachel Zegler, this wasn't just a box office bomb. It was the moment her name became tied to a cautionary tale, and the fallout was just beginning. The collapse of Snow White didn't just stain the box office, it stained reputations. And for Rachel Zegler, the blow wasn't just public, it was professional. Behind the scenes, murmurs turned into meetings. Suddenly, her name wasn't headlining future projects, it was raising red flags. Industry insiders began whispering what no rising star wants to hear. Is she too controversial to cast? This wasn't just about poor press, it was about perception. Hollywood loves a bold, bankable it girl, but it also has a short memory when the audience turns. Studios started re-evaluating projects where she was attached. A role once seen as her next big break quietly disappeared from development schedules. Meetings were postponed. Publicists worked overtime to reframe the narrative, but the damage had sunk in. And while Rachel stayed vocal, doubling down on empowerment and brushing off criticism as noise, the industry took note of her refusal to pivot. There was no heartfelt apology tour, no calculated comeback charm, just more statements, more interviews, and a defiance that read to some as tone-deaf. What made it worse? The contrast. Other actors in similar hot water had sidestepped backlash with humility or strategic silence. Rachel? She faced it head-on and lost control of the story. Each attempt to clarify only reignited old clips and new critiques. In an industry built on optics, the fallout wasn't just about a movie, it was about trust. And Rachel Zegler, once positioned as Disney's next powerhouse lead, now stood on shakier ground than ever. Not because of what she played on screen, but because of how it all played out off it. While Rachel Zegler was at the center of the storm, something else was quietly unfolding behind the scenes. The subtle distancing of her co-stars. In particular, Gal Gadot, who played the evil queen, seemed to navigate the chaos with surgical precision. From the outset of the press tour, it was clear that Gal was taking a different approach to the promotion of Snow White. Where Rachel leaned into the movie's progressive, feminist narrative, Gal steered clear of any divisive commentary. Early interviews with Gal were vague, diplomatic, almost too careful. She described Snow White as a fresh take, without delving into the specifics of what that meant for the beloved classic. Meanwhile, Rachel was openly critical of the original film, even mocking the love story between Snow White and the prince. Gal, however, remained poised, never making a controversial statement, and always emphasizing the excitement of playing an iconic villain. This contrast became even more apparent as the press tour went on. In joint interviews, Gal was all smiles and carefully calculated answers, while Rachel's bold remarks only seemed to dig her deeper into a hole. As the backlash against Rachel grew, it became harder to ignore that Gal was deliberately keeping her distance. At the Oscars, when the two actresses appeared together to present an award, fans couldn't help but notice the awkwardness between them. Their interactions were polite, but lacked the chemistry expected between co-stars. Body language experts noted how Gal subtly shifted away from Rachel, as if unwilling to become further embroiled in the growing scandal. While Rachel Zegler was at the center of the storm, something else was quietly unfolding behind the scenes. The subtle distancing of her co-stars. In particular, Gal Gadot, who played the evil queen, seemed to navigate the chaos with surgical precision. From the outset of the press tour, it was clear that Gal was taking a different approach to the promotion of Snow White. Where Rachel leaned into the movie's progressive, feminist narrative, Gal steered clear of any divisive commentary. Early interviews with Gal were vague, diplomatic, almost too careful. She described Snow White as a fresh take, without delving into the specifics of what that meant for the beloved classic. Meanwhile, Rachel was openly critical of the original film, even mocking the love story between Snow White and the prince. Gal, however, remained poised, never making a controversial statement, and always emphasizing the excitement of playing an iconic villain. This contrast became even more apparent as the press tour went on. In joint interviews, Gal was all smiles and carefully calculated answers, while Rachel's bold remarks only seemed to dig her deeper into a hole. As the backlash against Rachel grew, it became harder to ignore that Gal was deliberately keeping her distance. At the Oscars, when the two actresses appeared together to present an award, fans couldn't help but notice the awkwardness between them. Their interactions were polite, but lacked the chemistry expected between co-stars. Body language experts noted how Gal subtly shifted away from Rachel, as if unwilling to become further embroiled in the growing scandal. After the dust settled and the final numbers were counted, the question everyone was asking was simple: can Rachel Zegler ever recover from this? In Hollywood, comebacks are possible, but they require humility, self-awareness, and, most importantly, time. The problem for Rachel: she hasn't shown any signs of leaning into any of those things. Instead, she's dug in her heels, doubling down on her approach and choosing to defend her actions rather than acknowledge the wider critique. The idea of redemption for stars who fall from grace isn't new. Take someone like Robert Downey Jr., who transformed a career destroyed by personal issues into one of the most successful reinventions Hollywood has ever seen. But Rachel's situation is different. She didn't have the humility to apologize for her missteps, and she hasn't yet shown the charm to reconnect with audiences who have turned their backs. Without that, it's unclear how she could ever reclaim her footing. For now, Rachel's career seems to be in limbo. The projects that once seemed like surefire hits now look like risks. She's not been entirely written off. There's still potential for her to rebuild, but at what cost? Hollywood has a long memory, and unless Rachel makes some drastic changes to how she interacts with the public and the media, she may never fully recover from this scandal. The future of Rachel Zegler's career now hinges on the delicate balance between defiance and reflection. The question remains: will Hollywood give her a second chance, or is she forever destined to be remembered as one of Disney's most high-profile failures?